an 8-kilo mulloway. We caught a beautiful big fish.
Oh, that's good news.
It is.
Wrecked the mower and caught a fish.
Yeah, that's what happened. That's incredible, isn't it? You wouldn't believe that, would you?
You are a wealth of information, Stinker.
Well, there's something that I would like to announce, and I'm not very pleased. Well, it's just so disappointing. Last week I said to you that I was looking forward to going up to the Oyster and Timber Festival at Brewer.
Yes, I remember that.
Well, unfortunately, it's been postponed because Longworth Park, where it's normally held underneath the Crewe Bridge, has just become a bog. With all the rain that we've had, it's just became unable to conduct a carnival on the park.
Okay, so that's off.
It's off. Yeah, really disappointing because I'm a tremendous supporter of the people in Crewe and have been. I wrote a book about the oyster industry going back 10 or 12 years, and I met all the people, the oyster growers up in that area, and a wonderful bunch of people you've never met there. We're terrific people. So I'm quite disappointed for them, but I'm told it'll be back early in 2023. So that's good.
Stinker, in the oyster industry, in the Karua area, are they Sydney Rock oysters, Pacific oysters, or both?
Well, they're predominantly Sydney Rock oysters, but unfortunately, there's a virus that's entered the system called QX, which is called Queensland Unknown, and that's having a major impact on the oyster industry. So the oyster industry is going through tough times, and this is another very good reason that we're hoping that the carnival was on. So there's another blow to them. It's a tough job, Ammo. Growing oysters is hard work.
What's similar to farming in the respect that it's a 7-day-a-week job?
7-day-a-week job, most certainly, and it takes you 3 years before your harvest ripens when it comes to oysters. So, it's a long, hard slog to be able to produce those beautiful oysters that end up on your plate. But no, they were predominantly Sydney Rock oysters, which, in my opinion, are by far the best oyster.
You and I agree on that. Mate, always good to hear from you every Saturday. We'll have a chat next week.
Hooroo, Hamo.
Stinker Clark joining us with some good advice and some mysterious advice. It's 6:30. It's time for the news.
Good morning, Blake Doyle with ABC News. New South Wales residents in flood-affected areas are being asked to only drive where necessary, with conditions set to worsen today. The Weather Bureau has issued a severe weather warning for parts of the Hunter, the Illawarra and Central Tablelands in Sydney. There are also around 60 flood warnings for rivers across the state, mainly inland. The Bureau's Jordan Natara says the storms will move from the west of the state to coastal areas.
Those storms have a high risk of producing flash flooding across parts of the metropolitan, and they are going to be slowly pushing further north into areas of the Hunter as we get towards the later part of the evening, and slowly even further pushing over towards parts of the mid-north coast as we get towards the first parts of Sunday.
Bulga residents say flood warning levels in the town need to be reviewed to accurately reflect the threat or otherwise. Currently, a major flood level is at 4.6 metres, but locals say flooding occurs in the town at 7 metres. Head of the Bulga Resilience Team, Christy Headley, says the current flood levels are causing confusion.
I know that there are some rules around what is minor, what is moderate, what is major. They just need to be set so that they actually mean something for our community. And when an alert goes out, we know what that means. We know that the roads are going to go under, because at the moment, we just know there's going to be a lot of water.
Investigations are continuing into the drowning of an 11-year-old boy on the New South Wales south coast. He was pulled from the water at Murramarang Beach in Borley Point yesterday afternoon. There were reports he'd been caught in a rip. He was taken to Batemans Bay Hospital in a critical condition, where he died a short time later. Russia says it doesn't care that the same human rights campaigners it's tried to silence have been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports.
The prize has been shared three ways this year. Ukraine's Centre for Civil Liberties was honoured for documenting Russian war crimes. Jailed Belarusian democracy advocate Ales Belyatsky was also recognised, as was Memorial, a Russian organisation highlighting political repression that authorities have tried to shut down. Russia's ambassador to the UN Human Rights Council says his country doesn't care who won the award. It came on the same day the UN body voted to investigate human rights abuses in Russia. Nick Dole, ABC News.
Palestinian police have arrested a suspect following the death of a 25-year-old man after his body was found decapitated in the occupied West Bank. LGBTQ groups in Israel, where Ahmed Abu Marakia was seeking asylum, claim he had received death threats because he was gay. Video of the murder scene in Hebron has been spread widely on social media, raising speculation about the motive. New York Mayor Eric Adams has hit out at southern states as he declared a state of emergency in response to thousands of asylum seekers being bussed to the city. New York's city shelters have been stretched to capacity after Texas and other Republican-controlled states sent migrants to the city as part of a protest against the Biden administration's immigration policy. Mayor Adams says he's fed up with the southern states, claiming New York's generosity has reached its limits.
New Yorkers are angry. I am angry too. We have not asked for this. There was never any agreement to take on the job of supporting thousands of asylum seekers. This responsibility was simply handed to us without warning as buses began showing up.
In sport, reigning A-League men's premiers Melbourne City have opened the season with a 2-1 victory over grand final winners Western United. An own goal in the first half and a Jamie McLaren strike in the second gave Melbourne City a 2-goal lead before Nicholas Milanovic halved the deficit in stoppage time. Western United midfielder Neil Kilkenny told Paramount Plus that there's still a long way to go in the season.
It was a good game, they come out. You could see that they really wanted it, something to prove, after the grand final. But, it's one of them games. It's a long season. We know that they'll be out there at the end of the season, and they'll know that we'll be right thereabouts.
Newcastle boxer Darken Dryden says he's in peak condition for tonight's fight with Nikita Zhu. Dryden has had 4 fights, all won by technical knockout, while Zhu has had 3, with 2 won by knockout. Dryden says the fight won't go the distance.
Ready to go, ready to roll. It's the most shredded I've come in at. It's 6 weeks, short, sharp and intense, and ready to roll now. I thought it wouldn't go the distance when I was sitting on the lounge. Now I've trained for it, so it's not going the distance. I'm ready to go.
To the Hunters weather now. Rain most likely this afternoon and evening, possibly severe. Newcastle, Maitland and Cessnock headed for a top of 23 degrees, Singleton 22 and Scone 21. Rain and wind easing for Sunday and partly cloudy on Monday. This is ABC News.
Craig Hamilton
on ABC Newcastle.
Good morning. If you just joined us for the first time, 24 to 7, I have mower issues. Now, this is a serious problem that I need to have solved. Mower stopped the other day.
There's not a high nutrient value in what is coming through. It's bright green grass, but it doesn't have a lot of base to it, so we're seeing a lot of livestock looking pretty ordinary and washed out. So a lot of people moving to having to add some supplementary feed regimes for their stock just to ensure that they are not, just eating this really low nutrient bright green grass all the time.
No, I get it. No problem. No problem. Good luck. Stay dry. Thanks for bringing us up to date with what's happening in Vasey.
Look, it's a great break for anyone who doesn't want to be mowing lawns at the moment, because you certainly would get your mower bogged even if you tried.
It's one of those mower days. I'm talking about mowers today, Penny.
Well, yeah, not a day for mowing around our traps, unfortunately.
No. And those that can't get their mowers going, which is me at the moment, doesn't have to worry about it. Don't have to worry about mowing.
No, definitely not.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Craig.
See ya. There's Penny Evans in Vasey. Well, you can hear the sound in the background. That's the surf. Dave Anderson, good morning.
G'day there, Craig.
How's it looking? Sounds pretty wild and woolly.
It's not that bad. We've got offshore wind for this morning. It's also a bit of inland fog as well. So we're not exactly the conditions we're expecting for today. They had a strong wind warning out for north and northeast winds. The ships are starting to face around that way. So more than likely the conditions will get around that way later on today. But this morning, surf conditions are smaller and cleaner with these offshore winds coming out of the northwest at 5 knots. We've got a short period swell that's gone around to the east this morning. It's running at 1.2 metres at 8 seconds from 110 degrees. So wave size, it's around that 3 foot mark, maybe the occasional 4 foot set wave, but the tide is filling. High tide will be at 5 minutes past 8, 1.6 metres. Low tide this afternoon at 4 minutes to 2. That's half a metre. Water temperature still on 17 degrees. Water's a little bit murky after the rain that we've had, and there are slight sweeps running to the south. Looking for some surf today. Well, we've got the Surf Life Saving State surfboard riding titles here at Merriweather Beach. They're setting up here, so this will probably be a no area to go zone for the morning at least. While they're having their competition out here, they're just setting things up. But there are some nice waves down towards Pogonoski's, Dixon Park, South Bar, and also Newcastle Beach with that swell direction around to the east. It's suiting the northern corners a little bit better than what we've got here at Merriweather. Still 9 ships at Anchor off port. We've got winds in the harbour at northwest at 7 knots. Also northwesterly down at Swansea at 5 knots. The bar is moderate there. They'll have a bridge opening at 9 a.m. with half-metre seas and a 1 metre swell. Pressure there steady at 1,014. And Port Stevens, north-northeast up there at 4 knots. Inside water slight, there's no break on the shoals. Pressure there on 1,012. 17 degrees here, so 17 in and 17 out. Ryan Callanan won again last night. And also Sarah Baum, she's got through into the quarterfinals. Morgan Sibley, his heat was called off. He'll surf sometime this evening as well. So they're all moving up the point scores over there, and I think Ryan's not far off from qualifying back for the WCT. But surf-wise this morning, you get some nice clean waves about if you get up here early before that wind starts to get around to the northeast later on.
Okay. Thanks for the update, Dave.
Okay, great.
Dave Anderson on our beach this morning, on our beaches with the latest. Now, plenty coming your way. We're going to be talking to a former Wallaby captain after the news, which is next at 7.
The Australian Defence Force on standby for possible flooding in New South Wales. 1 million Facebook users told they could have had personal information stolen, and Thailand's King and Queen meet survivors of this week's childcare centre massacre. It's 7 o'clock. Good morning, I'm Blake Doyle with ABC News. The New South Wales State Emergency Service has asked the Australian Defence Force for help with night flood rescues, with the weather forecast to worsen across the state later today. Danuta Kazaki reports.
New South Wales Emergency Services Minister Steph Cook used social media last night to announce the SES had asked the ADF for some help with nighttime rescues. 3 Defence helicopters will be on standby from tonight for use in Greater Sydney, the Hunter region and Forbes in the state's central west. Meanwhile, the Weather Bureau's Jordan Notara says there's a severe weather warning for Greater Sydney, parts of the Illawarra, Hunter and the Central Tablelands.
That is going to be more likely as we head towards Saturday afternoon, where we are going to see a low start to deepen.
The SES says there are around 60 flood warnings across the state, with many inland rivers potentially seeing more flooding today and tomorrow.
The Bureau of Meteorology has issued a severe weather warning that includes parts of the lower Hunter. The Bureau says the Hunter's coast could experience damaging winds of up to 70 kilometres an hour, with heavy rainfall of between 30 to 50 millimetres, with isolated falls of up to 70 millimetres across the Hunter. A flood watch is in place for minor to major flooding along Wallumbye Brook and the lower Hunter River, and for minor flooding on the Patterson and Williams rivers. The New South Wales Farmers Association says farmers across the state are apprehensive about the flooding situation and worsening weather forecast today. There are concerns 5 inland dams are likely to spill into already flooding rivers this weekend. Sydney's Warragamba Dam is already spilling, with the outflow expected to increase this weekend. Farmers Association President Xavier Martin says there's been talk about why the dams weren't released slightly before this weather event. He says comparisons have been made with Wivenhoe Dam, when Queensland water authorities were found to have negligently managed the dam during floods in 2011.
Many farmers are looking at their valleys, and particularly those that have got public dams. There's quite a bit of chatter about, is this a Wivenhoe syndrome where the dam was let full in the face of forecasts for days and days of rain? There's considerable apprehension that so many dams are full in so many valleys.
Water New South Wales has been contacted for comment. Facebook will alert around 1 million users around the world. They've been exposed to malicious apps designed to steal personal information. Here's political reporter Matthew Doran.
Facebook's parent company Meta says it's detected 400 apps which have been available for download and use on Apple and Android devices, designed to steal social media logins and scrape personal information from accounts. The apps are disguised as things like photo editors or games and ask people who download them to log in to their Facebook accounts. Meta is insisting it's being overly cautious and it may not be 1 million people exposed to the apps, but it's urging those who receive a notification to change their passwords and enable login alerts so users can monitor whether other people are trying to access their accounts.
Thailand's Prime Minister has visited the families of the victims of a mass knife and gun attack in the country's northeast. Southeast Asia correspondent Mazoe Ford reports from northeast Thailand.
Prayut Chan-o-cha came to the Utai Sawan Child Development Centre to meet and pray with the families of the people who died in Thursday's attack. The Thai Prime Minister then walked around handing out oversized compensation cheques for 200,000 baht, which is about $8,000. Thailand's King and Queen have also been to the region. They met with survivors in a local hospital and pledged to cover the costs of funerals for the victims. At least 36 people died on Thursday after a former policeman went on a gun and knife rampage inside the childcare centre. Zoe Ford, ABC News, Utai Sawan.
Residents of Martins Creek in the Hunter Valley are concerned about the possible impacts the expansion of Martins Creek Quarry could have on the community. The Department of Planning this week approved the expansion. The Independent Planning Commission will make a final decision. Secretary of the Martins Creek Quarry Action Group, James Ashton, says there would be a range of issues if an approval is granted.
The impacts range from blasting damage to noise and dust impacts coming off site to the hundreds upon hundreds of trucks through rural roads and rural villages. If an approval is granted, we're talking 280 truck movements per day.
Darracon says it's undertaken a lengthy and comprehensive process in addressing the potential impact and that the process has been fair. A firefighter has been taken to hospital suffering smoke inhalation while fighting a house fire at Maryland overnight. Fire crews from Maryland, Minmay and Cardiff fought the fire in the brick and tile home on Ulambi Crescent for about an hour. The captain from the Cardiff Brigade is recovering in John Hunter Hospital. No one else was injured and the home was badly damaged. An inquest into the death of Charlie Powell in Queanbeyan, New South Wales, has found the 17-year-old Wiradjuri teen took her own life. Talia Roy reports.
Charlie Powell died in the early hours of February 11, 2019. Ms. Powell's family had fought for her death to be investigated, as they did not believe she took her own life. Magistrate Harriet Graham found her suicide occurred in the context of domestic violence, and that the teen had been subjected to threats and physical abuse by her boyfriend, Rowan Rosewarne. Magistrate Graham found New South Wales Police did not question Mr. Rosewarne for more than 8 months after the death, and that an interview only occurred because the man was in custody for another matter. Ms. Powell has been described as fun and loving.
The UN Human Rights Council has made history by voting to investigate abuses within Russia. Europe correspondent Nick Dole reports.
It's the first time the UN body's established a special rapporteur to investigate a permanent member of the Security Council. Russia says it's a political decision. China was among the countries backing Moscow, and many members abstained, but the motion succeeded with US and European backing. It came just hours after the Nobel Peace Prize was jointly awarded to Memorial, which highlights political repression in Russia. Ukraine's Center for Civil Liberties was also recognized for documenting Russian war crimes, and jailed Belarusian campaigner Ales Belyatsky was honored for his work promoting democracy. Nick Dole, ABC News.
US stocks have nosedived as solid job growth boosted the chance of further interest rate hikes. Here's North America correspondent Carrington Clark.
The US Labor Department's closely watched employment report showed an increase of 263,000 jobs last month. The unemployment rate also dropped to just 3.5% in September. The numbers indicate the US economy is still running hot, which makes it more likely the Federal Reserve will have to hike interest rates even faster to get inflation under control. Investors betting the Federal Reserve will ramp up rates by a further 0.75 of a percentage point at its next meeting in November. Carrington Clark, ABC News, Washington. The specimens collected from the recent stranding of about 230 pilot whales near Strahan on Tasmania's west coast are set to benefit researchers across the world. It's hoped the insights gained will provide experts with a better understanding of why strandings occur. Tasmanian Museum and Art Gallery senior curator David Hocking says his team was fielding calls for specific specimens to be collected as soon as news broke about the stranding.
One of the samples we were able to collect at this event was a brain from one of the animals, which is going to some researchers in the US that are interested in whether or not some sort of brain injury may be partly one of the things that contributes to these sorts of events.
Now with sport, here's Jared Coote.
Australia has won its T20 series against the West Indies, beating the visitors by 31 runs in the second and final match of the series. David Warner smashed 75 runs in just 41 balls as Australia reached 171 from their 20 overs. In response, Australia limited the West Indies to just 8 for 147. Warner says he's feeling refreshed ahead of the upcoming World Cup.
Yeah, look, it's my second hit in about 30 days, so I'm quite happy. Nice and fresh, which is great. A great lead into this next couple of games against England and then obviously leading into the World Cup. So I feel good and the boys look great.
Melbourne City have opened the A-League men's season with a 2-1 victory over last year's champions Western United. In the NBL, the New Zealand Breakers have beaten the Tasmania Jack Jumpers 71 points to 65 in their first home NBL appearance in almost 2 years. The Sydney Kings were too strong for the Brisbane Bullets, winning 100 points to 90. And Richmond has moved to 5th spot on the AFLW ladder, beating the West Coast Eagles by 19 points in Perth. Earlier, Carlton beat St Kilda by 27 points.
To the Hunters weather now. Rain most likely this afternoon and evening, possibly severe. Newcastle, Maitland and Cessnock headed for a top of 23 degrees, Singleton 22 and Scone 21. You're listening to ABC News.
Spend your Saturday with Craig Hamilton
on ABC Newcastle.
Good morning, 7:12. If you're just joining us for the first time, got rain ahead for today and tomorrow.
It's multi-discipline in a sense. So we literally start with your feet in the Caribbean and end up with your feet in the Pacific. So it starts with a bit of, it's almost you got to think about it, as people might be familiar with a country like New Zealand. It's got a big mountain range through the middle where the one in Costa Rica happens to be volcanic and covered in jungle as opposed to the Alps in New Zealand. So we paddle the edge in a kayak and then we mountain bike the foothills and then we walk through the jungle in the middle and then do the reverse on the way out. So in terms of training, you've kind of had to do a bit of all of that. So, I'm out for a walk at the moment. I've got my hiking boots on, but then I've had to spend a fair bit of time on a bike. It's been raining plenty, so sometimes inside, sometimes out. And then getting used to indecent paddling down in Sydney Harbour where I am as well.
Now, how did you put your team together? The people who will be on your team for this walk.
Yeah, it wasn't a process. It was like, do you want to come and do you want to pay for it?
Fair enough.
It wasn't putting together a traditional expedition team and balancing people's strengths and things like that. It was, are you keen? I think it'll be a remarkable adventure. Costa Rica's not somewhere generally on people's maps in Australia. It's pretty hard to get to in terms of flights, etc. But it's also, it's got it's almost sort of 70% Costa Rica's national park and jungle, so it's got this wildlife that's just outstanding as well. So there'll be plenty to see.
Now, one member, apart from yourself, in your team is a former World Cup rugby player, Will Greenwood, who is from Britain. Now, my question, Dean, for you is, why are you hanging around English rugby players?
Yeah, it's a good question. They've beaten us the last 8-10 times. It's not the time to hang out with an English rugby player. But Will and I, he lost his son Freddie to to preterm birth as well, and he's a patron of the British arm of our charity. So ours is a collaboration charity, so we obviously work with the amazing scientists and researchers at HMRI, but then he works with the British side. So I suppose in terms of that, a lot of research has to be really finite and defined, like the nature of being a specialist in something, but we want to try and bring the world's best researchers together to help solve this problem, because it's not one that's particularly well funded, so you need to try and get the best researchers to come to mind so we can make the most of it in a lot of ways.
Okay, all the very best with it. October 14, I'm going to give the details now as to how people can support you and help raise $30,000 and hopefully more than that, Dean, for medical research. Thanks for telling us about it today.
No worries, thanks for your time.
There's Dean Mum, who is a former Wallaby captain, and the details here, if you would like to get in touch and raise money, at www.borne, borne.org.uk or www.hmri.org.au/Borne HMRI. Now, the Borne, again, spelt BORNE. Now, for miscarriage, newborn and stillbirth death support, it's available 24/7. The helpline is 1300 308 307. 1300 308 307. Or if you'd like to talk to someone at Lifeline, always there, 13 14. Start again, Craig. 13 11 14. 13 11 14. Time for the news. Good morning, Blake Doyle with ABC News. The Bureau of Meteorology has issued a severe weather warning for parts of the Lower Hunter. The Bureau says there could be damaging winds of up to 70 kilometres an hour along parts of the coast, heavy rainfall of between 30 to 50 millimetres, with isolated falls of up to 70 millimetres. The weather is expected to deteriorate later today and ease late on Sunday morning. A flood watch is in place for minor to major flooding along Wallumbye Brook and the Lower Hunter River, and for minor flooding on the Patterson and Williams Rivers. Helen Kirkup from the Weather Bureau says the Hunter could avoid the worst of it.
It's a bit borderline whether it will really reach that sort of severe criteria, but some, like we could easily still, with this rain coming across, continual showers, and with that ground being so wet, it's just a chance we get heavier showers and we do get that flash flooding.
A home at Maryland has been badly damaged by fire overnight. Fire crews from Maryland, Minmay and Cardiff were called to Ulambi Crescent, where a brick and tile home was well alight. One firefighter was taken to the John Hunter Hospital, suffering smoke inhalation. No one in the home was injured. 3 rooms of the house were destroyed. The company behind an expansion of the Martins Creek Quarry says it's undertaken a comprehensive process in addressing the impacts on residents in the area. Darracon has applied to more than triple its operations to extract 1.1 million tonnes, with 280 truck movements a day through several Maitland suburbs. Secretary of the Martins Creek Quarry Action Group, James Ashton, says the expansion has been a concern for the community for many years.
It's had a long and controversial history. It's been operated unlawfully for many years and then was the subject of a huge land and environment court victory by Dungog Council several years ago. And Darracon are now seeking to basically make lawful what they previously did unlawfully by way of this application.
The Greens say Newcastle can learn from the past as the region transitions from fossil fuels to new forms of energy. The party has introduced a bill for a National Energy Transition Authority. The organisation would coordinate Australia's move to new forms of energy. Greens councillor John McKenzie says lessons in transition can be learned from the closure of the Newcastle Steelworks in 1999.
We don't have the same kinds of impacts that we saw with BHP closures and other big economic impacts in our city, where the change happened without the fulsome support and the fulsome work in ensuring that transition was smooth and effective.
History will balloon to life on Lake Macquarie this weekend as the Belmont 16 celebrate a century of skiff sailing.
The first 16-foot skiff sailing race was held on Belmont Bay on October 7, 1922, and 100 years on, the club is staging a centenary regatta. Belmont 16's life member and skiff sailor Gary Beecham says the two-day regatta highlights the significance of the club.
If you can last 100 years sailing the one class of boat, I think it says something, and I think it says something for our wonderful sailing waters out in front of us. This is the best sailing water anywhere, as far as I'm concerned, and we just keep producing great sailors, and our records will stand up with anybody.
And the Newcastle Jets kick off their A-League season this afternoon against old foes, the Mariners, on the Central Coast. It'll be a new-look Jets outfit to the side that placed 9th last season, but showed glimpses of promise in attack. Coach Arthur Pappas says today is the first chance for players to cement their positions.
Preparing for this game, making sure that you've had a solid pre-season, boys are in good spirits, worked on the way we want to play. It's fairly clear what sort of lineup we'll end up going with as it's progressed. But in saying that, it's up to the boys that start to take their opportunity.
To the Hunters' weather now. Rain most likely this afternoon and evening, possibly severe. Newcastle, Maitland and Cessnock headed for a top of 23 degrees, Singleton 22 and Scone 21. Rain and wind easing for Sunday and partly cloudy on Monday. For more local news, search ABC Newcastle News online.